so let's start big picture. Like, what is the importance of talking about food sustainability and insecurity to start?
Well, I think we face some really big challenges, Nick. Let's start with population growth. Today we have about 8 billion people. It's projected to grow to 9 billion by 2050. There's another interesting stat that I think we should be mindful of, and that's about a calorie gap. And we expect that calorie gap to grow by 50% between now and 2050. So in order to deal with that, let's leave the big statistics aside. In order to address that deficit, we'd have to deforest land about twice the size of India to solve that problem. Obviously not a sustainable solution. And then we add the context of extreme weather, so floods, droughts, water constraints, arable land constraints. And there's a big challenge, but with big challenge comes big change. And I think American ag is extremely resilient and creative. And if we bring all the stakeholders together, as the congressman just talked about, I think we can solve it.
I mean, he mentioned that sort of like innovation and scientific progress is a key part of that. So let's unpack a little bit. I love the phrase calorie gap. What steps need to be taken to help close that? It can't just be more farms, cutting down more trees. What is the technological, I guess, aspect of closing that gap in your head?
Yeah, so I think the theme is really about doing more with less. And what if we just start with the premise that we could increase yield by 20 to 30%? And first you say, well, like, how do you do that? Let's just take some real life analogies that we all know. Think about what an Olympic athlete does in terms of working on their mind, their diet, their exercise regimen, to get more out of the human body than average people are able to do. And the direct analogy to thinking about agriculture is how do we think about advanced crop nutrition that can really work with the soil, drive a stronger, what we would call microbiome, or the biologicals in the soil. You start with a great soil, you got a better chance of having a more robust plant. You manage that plant really well, and you're going to get greater yield. And I would drive this point home with, some of you may be familiar with a national corn competition. Average corn yields in the US are about plus minus 200 bushels an acre. And that competition, the best farmers get 500 to 600 bushels an acre. Granted, they're babied and well taken care of, but there is a 20 to 30% sliver that we can go after with technology, innovation, and better practices.
And that's looking at almost like, again, these are some good metaphors here. So like looking at a farm almost as an athlete that you can train, that like you can look at the inputs and the outputs to increase that kind of yield. So let's bring that into the Mosaic company. Tell us a little bit about where your company sits at that nexus.
Yeah, so the mission at Mosaic is to help the world grow the food that it needs. And for those of us who work there, it's much more than a mission statement. It's really about our place in agriculture and, frankly, our role in society to help do more. Fertilizer itself contributes about 50% of crop yields. So I think it's a really critical part of solving the overall challenge, but not something that any one company can do by itself.
So what are the interesting things that are sort of coming down the pike from your vantage point?
Yeah, so maybe we could start with some really good practices today and then talk about the extreme, like what's really out there if we lean into this. So there's a program called the 4R Stewardship, which I know several of folks in this room have put the better part of a decade plus in working into getting that adopted. Very simple. What is 4Rs? It's about putting down the right product in the right place in the right amounts at the right time. And, okay, so what does that have to do with this conversation? Well, let's take this home. I went to grad school for environmental engineering probably before half the room was born. And when I studied that, there was the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, the hypoxic zone, which was a growing problem, and there was no clear way to solve that. Actually, this 4R program that farmers have continued to adopt have started to shrink that zone. And now there's technology, we call them biologicals, that are just starting to come to market that can do more efficient use of fertilizer, so less runoff. So imagine now you leap this up on a bit of steroids.
Right.
And then there's what I consider the holy grail of agriculture, which is really reducing nitrogen use, because it's the biggest single driver of greenhouse gases that there is. And there's work going on today to help corn and other row crops be able to fix or take out of the atmosphere half of the nitrogen that they need. that would radically change the world, not only from an agricultural perspective, but from a greenhouse gas
Well, I mean,
perspective.
that's like kind of a focus here. Like, it's not just about closing the calorie gap. This is about food insecurity and sustainability. So
Exactly.
what else can you tell us about the efforts, like how those things go hand in hand? Are there, similar to that, the nitrogen idea of pulling that?
Yeah, so there are other things that tie into this. Today, farmers will use drones and other imagery to look at crops kind of as surrogates for how are those crops doing, let them apply different products to manage the crops more efficiently, but it's all proxy. We're actually partnering with a university today to develop thumbnail sensors that are biodegradable, cost pennies to make, that can be put down in row crops to actually directly measure the amount of nutrients in the ground, which would then allow the farmer to precisely place what they need where they need it. And there's a next generation on top of that where folks are looking at how do you have plants directly signal, and light not visible to the naked eye, that, hey, we're stressed, we need a little bit of nitrogen here, or we need some potassium over here. I mean, these things drive efficiency in such a different way. And I think we're on the cusp of the next big revolution. I mean, we're not a field like computing technology where things move fast every 2 years. Synthetic nitrogen was first produced about 100 years ago commercially. Then it took all the way to the 60s to get to the green revolution. And then all the way to the 90s to have seed traits really drive production. And I think with AI and what we know about genomics, we're probably 5 or 6 years away from the next big breakthrough.
We're on the cusp of another huge leap about that. And then what kind of impact do you think that would have? I mean, are you seeing like similar to the Green Revolution, which was like massive as far as both increasing the amount of crops and like holding that calorie gap?
Yeah, I think it changes the game. But to make all of that happen, I think we have to go back to where the congressman actually began his conversation. Is we actually have to treat agriculture like a national asset, a collective priority, and we've got to drive some policy changes to make that happen.
Well, this is the perfect segue. You know, I love these events in Washington because the folks who get up early for this are the folks who really care about this as a topic. These are the people who write the policy, or at least think they write the policy. So as a practitioner in the field, like, what is the advice? How can they help?
So the first policy place I would go is let's think about what the Inflation Reduction Act is doing in the area of green energy. And the congressman mentioned that we are adding more funding in agriculture, but I think we could relate what we're trying to do with climate change and agriculture and put more money into things like some of these nitrogen fixation products, because they are a ways away and not one company can solve it on its own. The other big thing is we've got to think about the fact that technology is outstripping regulations, as it is in many areas. But I'll give you an example. That product that we're working on to fix nitrogen, we're having to trial that in Brazil because there's no clear regulatory pathway in the US, and there is a clear pathway in Brazil. And again, building on the congressman's earlier statements, while we are in the lead in agriculture, there is a risk. Brazil is actually adopting new farm practices at the highest compound annual growth rate of any geography. You have younger farmers coming in, and we're struggling to attract younger farmers in the US. So these are challenges that are there, but I guess where I would kind of like to wrap this up and tie the story together is big challenges drive big changes, and the energy that I get when I go to an event we call it an Ag Tech Day. We do it with a university in Illinois, and I'm not picking on any one university. It'd be like calling out a college football team, get yourself in trouble. But when you see the innovation that's happening, not just ours, what competitors are doing, what students are doing, what agronomists are doing, you can see that the world of agriculture is going to change and yields are going to go up. But it's going to take us working together from the policy side, from the government side, from the farmer, all of us. But I think for ag, the best days are yet to come.
It's like, and I think the folks in the room need to realize it's moving a lot faster than you think it used to be. All right, we're about to get the hook here. Axios tradition, we end on one fun thing. You are now based in Tampa. Your prior posting, however, was probably the most un-Tampa town in all of all of North America, Saskatchewan, which was better. What are the best differences?
If you love winter and you love to snowshoe, I moved to Saskatchewan in October, and there was snow on the ground till May. It was great to leave. My timing's not very good because we moved in summer to Florida. Both are great places. Both have great farmers.
Very good diplomatic answer. Well, thanks so much for making today happen.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.